and Policy Times, India. And today we are going to discuss the latest report about the Environmental Performance Index, which was released 10 days ago. And it's discussing the performance of around 180 countries in different environmental indicators. And that is giving the ranking of the worldwide on the global scale, on the country levels. So we have our distinguished panelists today, and we have Prof. Zainun Noor. She's a professor and the director for Center of Environmental Sustainability at University Technology Malaysia, and she is also a consultant for UNDP. And our second panelist, Prof. Omar Aga, and he's a professor and the Vice Dean of Strategic Planning and Accreditation at Imam Abdurrahman bin Faisal University in Saudi Arabia. And will be joining us later, Prof. Ibrahim Hassan. He's Professor of Air Pollution, Faculty of Science, Alexandria University, Egypt. And he's the Vice President of National Committee of Environmental Problems, Academy of Science and Research and Technology. And he's a consultant for air quality at UNDP. So we might start with Prof. Zainura. And since, Prof, you were involved in developing the Environmental Performance Index locally and globally. So how do you see the EPI for Malaysia in this latest report? Can you, Prof, unmute yourself, please?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wesam. The involvement of environment, how Malaysia get involved in the first place is because of a writing shared by our previous Vice Chancellor, Dr. Zainul Jang, when he wrote about the EPI scoring Malaysia, how did Malaysia perform in EPI 2010, if I'm not mistaken. That has captured the attention of the minister from the ministry at that moment called Natural Resources and Environment. So they were not much attention was paid on EPI before, but then when he commented, he wrote newspaper column on that, commenting how Malaysia was performing during that particular year. The ministry has called upon our university to do a specific study on EPI on local scale, meaning that instead of rating the world, we are adopting the same approach to rate the state in Malaysia. So we have 13 states and 1 federal territory. So we use at that time, during the first EPI, we used the same indicators that we use to rank the country, and then use that for Malaysia. And in the next EPI, because EPI is produced every 2 years, so we adopt the same approach. In the next EPI, we customize the indicators to suit our country better. So that's how I get involved. That was one of the pioneer members in the team before I lead the team later on. So we produced 2010, 2012, and 2014 EPI for Malaysia. So that's a bit about how the involvement, my involvement in Malaysia EPI.
Okay. So now, Prof. Omar, how do you see the performance of Saudi Arabia in terms of the environmental performance indicator, and if you can reflect that in the Middle East context as well?
Thank you, Dr. Wissam, for organizing such a meeting. Actually, with these distinguished colleagues, with one of the topics that I believe every country in the world needs to tackle in terms of indicators for the environmental performance in each country. This environmental performance index, this is one of the environmental indexes that's present in the world, not the only one, but is from the Yale Center in the United States. It tackles two different topics, generally the environmental health and the ecosystem, and it uh, puts different indexes. So what tried to just to figure out that this is an index which, like in the university ranking, you have different kind of ranking, QS and others, and you can find yourself in one in the within the 1,000, and the other uh, uh, in 500. So Saudi Arabia in this index 2020 got the rank in the 90th position. The 90th position in the world, that means need a lot of work. When I went into deeply into these indicators, I can tell that there is some of the indicators because of the I was experienced also the another index which is university oriented. I was involved in that one. It's called UI Green Metrics, which is developed by Indonesia, University of Indonesia. So that one, that index, just suppose that every country should have a forest, for example, or the campus in the university. They are ranking the universities according different indexes, including some indicators about green cover and forest. The same thing here in this indicator, as you might see, there is some, for example, fisheries, whereas some countries are not on sharing some sea shores, for example. In Saudi Arabia, the um, attention to the environment has been escalated within the past 10 years. Last 5 years, and the first time in the history of the Saudi Arabia, there is a Ministry of Environment has been established. So this one gives a momentum for a reform. And I am in contact with my colleagues in the ministry, and most of them from private companies like Aramco, EPD department, and from academia. They are at high level of knowledge, and they are trying to make a reform for the regulations, and they established 5 centers or to tackle all the environmental problems. What I'm trying to tell here, this position, I expect in the upcoming years just to go for 60s, even 50s around the world, because of there is a lot of areas to be improved regarding, for example, biodiversity and these things. So I can tell that this is a good indicator. It's I mean, could be a good momentum or enthusiasm for the countries to take actions to improve their performance indicators.
Thank you, Prof. Here, Mr. Akram joining us, and
Thank you so much.
he's
I'm really sorry I
co-moderating
gotta.
the session. So maybe back to Prof. Zainura. What are the challenges for in the Malaysian scenario? If we are talking about improving the indicators, so what are the current challenges for the improvements?
Can you repeat that, please? Can you repeat that, please? Because I couldn't hear you for the last about 20 seconds.
Yeah, I was trying to say, if we are going to improve the environmental indicators in the Malaysian context, so what are the challenges nationwide? And maybe if you want to reflect it also on the ASEAN region, if you want to compare the Malaysian scenario with some regional players as well.
All right. in the first place, the ranking, there are few factors why the ranking of a country keep changing. I mean, of course, one of the factor would be because your own environmental performance, but as the years goes by, you have more country joining the ranking. So because of that, your particular ranking would be even, either worse or better. So because like you have more country starting to join the the exercise, then you could probably whether fall down the ranking or go up the ranking. But then as far as looking at the exercise and reflecting back on how would affect a country, then we would have to say whether or not in the first place the government are putting emphasis on this particular exercise on the perceptions of other countries about Malaysian performance. Interestingly, EPI is stable in World Economic Forum, whereby there would be major players, investors attending that forum. Hence, that would probably play an important role in terms of for investors to decide in which country they would like to invest if their priority are on the environmental side. So at the beginning, as far as looking at the particular indicators and reflecting back on the country performance, I think we should, although, like I said, that would definitely reflect to a certain extent a country performance. We should take that with, what I say, with a pinch of salt, because some of the data are taken from third party. For example, although we do have our own air quality data, for EPI, they use satellite data instead, because they use satellite data for all the countries are being assessed in EPI. So we have to see whether, looking at the indicators, we have to see in the first place whether that particular data actually represent our country situation and the validity of the data itself, as well as whether we are actually there are policies in that area. So looking at the hotspots, looking at the data, I think we have to take all that into perspective and make decision based on that particular element. As far as our ranking is concerned over the years, our ranking, we have seen we were doing quite well during the early years. We were at some point we were ranked at number 25, but then we slided down the ranking, and at the worst we have been at number 75. So, and currently in the current exercise, we are ranked at number 63. So that's not so bad considering that we were at 65 before. So looking at that situation, there are indicators that actually, reflecting why Malaysia is not doing so well, but there are other situations whereby these indicators, although it's reflecting on Malaysian situation, environment condition, but there are elements that tie back with the economic conditions or the policy that been practiced in the country. For example, there were times when fisheries was one of the indicators being used in the EPI exercise. So in Malaysia, we use fisheries. One of the economic element is how people actually earn their income. So in EPI, the indicators was if you use, for example, trawling to do fishing, then you would gain perhaps very low marks for that. But in that sense, we cannot change much. We cannot make much improvement on that area, because those are area whereby those are the method that being used by the fishermen in Malaysia for quite some time. So looking in taking the assessment, we have to look into, there are many factors that has to be considered before you could actually say that if you score low marks in this, that's definitely you're not doing well in that particular area. But you could use to reflect the situation, but also take other factors into consideration.
Thank you. So, Prof. Omar, what about the scenario in Saudi Arabia? What are the challenges for improvements? Might be the situation in the Middle East will be a bit complicated because you have to consider other elements as well.
Absolutely. I agree with Dr. Zinura, what she mentioned about the reliability of the data and the how they collected this data. I doubt, for example, when I look to the report, you can find neighbor countries like, for example, Kuwait, Bahrain are maybe they are ranked in 56, 47, and Saudi Arabia ranked 90. And I know from my experience to what extent there is efforts in Saudi Arabia in this manner. For example, United Arab Emirates, 42. It's I can understand that they have a lot of things they have been done. On the other hand, let me just give you one thing. For example, in terms of human health, when you want to measure the air quality, if you look to the air quality index in the region in Saudi Arabia on the Gulf region, uh, Saudi Arabia getting a frequent of more than 15 episodes of dust storms, which is naturally present. And I'm calling you, and outside there is dust storm from yesterday. If you look to the in equality index, air quality index, you will find that it is maybe yellow or orange or sometimes red. This is because of the high particles, including particle 2.5. So we have to understand the nature of these regions, and you cannot compare, for example, Saudi Arabia in terms of vegetation and land cover and forest with the Asian countries, for example. So I think there should be what we call normalization factor. So region-wise, there should be normalization factors to put emphasis on some of the indicators and decrease the effect of others, to be fair. Otherwise, as I mentioned to you, in my experience in the university ranking of green metrics, we couldn't take any points from green cover forest, for example. If you have a forest in your campus, you will get more points, which is cannot happen in Saudi Arabia, for example. So normalization factor, I think we have to use statistics, we have to use some of the experience and see how we can put this together. But generally speaking, I can tell that the Saudi Arabia is in the right track. They have established 5 centers. Each center specialized in wildlife, marine life, waste management. So they are dedicated to tackle all the problems. And I expect in the upcoming years to see a huge improvement in these indicators and laws. And we are expecting recently just to get a reform, because before that we have the environmental metrology and environment agency that is just dealing with this. Now we have a ministry dealing with these all of issues. So as Dr. Zanura mentioned, we have to tackle two pillars here. One is the legislative one, and I think we are doing good in this one in Saudi Arabia. And the other one is just to see what kind of improvement that we can do. In my opinion, we have to be selective country-wise on which of the parameters that you need to improve. Otherwise, you cannot do in every area. I can do better for some areas. For example, renewable. Every country has its own renewable resources. Here might be the solar, while in Malaysia or Asian could be the hydroelectric power or others.
So maybe back to Mr. Akram.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Wesam. Wonderful discussion. I just wanted to share some facts. I think you already have discussed a lot of things. What I wanted to show, and there is a question from one of our audience for Professor Aga, which you partially have answered now. I'll come back with the question a little bit later, but before that, let me just quickly present some facts. Here, the recent EPI, Environmental Performance Index, that was published in 2020. I just want to take our viewers through some of the latest update about this. That if you see this chart, the EPI ranking, the dark blue are So the regions which the countries which rank within 1 to 36. So these are the countries which are marked dark blue, where I think some part of the Europe falls, Latin America is also here, and maybe large part of Russia. And what I see is Australia. So these are some of the countries. I'll name the countries later. Then 37, a lighter blue version, 37 to 72. So the countries which are colored in lighter blue are ranking within this. And then very light blue is 73 to 108. And the countries which are ranking at the bottom are the ones which are ranking are in white color and ranking 145 to 180. And I think a lot of African countries are here. And India, what I see is India and the entire India, and then some Pakistan is also falling here, and some African countries. So this is the fact. Now here, the 2020 EPI has drawn or brought a conclusion that higher per capita GDP has close connection with EPI index. So the countries which have higher per capita, like China, is ranking here below. Uh, Now, most of the European countries which have higher GDP per capita are also ranking quite fair in the EPI score. Singapore is here. Qatar is down. So Qatar is an exception. So Qatar's GDP per capita is highest, but it is not ranking highest in the EPI score. But yeah, it's very pretty obvious that most of the European countries are ranking very fair in the index. Seychelles is the one I think is ranking also very nice. Brazil is quite doing well compared to among the BRICS countries. So China, Russia is also decent, very, very decent. But India, among the BRICS countries, India is at the bottom, while Nigeria is also here. So this is just a small comparative. Here, this is a chart or table which shows, in fact, a graph which is giving a reflection of all the EPI, I think, criteria. Dr. Vesam, you can come in whenever if you want to say something on this, or any of our experts, if you are here, would like to say something. I think Dr. Noora, you are in mute. I think if you want to share anything on this, please, you're most welcome to share. So here, ecosystem vitality 60%, environmental health 40%. So the EPI score has divided like in these two parameters. So ecosystem vitality has 60% weightage in this, and among the environmental health, they have the air quality, which has 20% weightage, sanitation, drinking water 16%, heavy metals is just 2%, wastewater is also there, pollution emissions also is coming under the ecosystem vitality. So climate change having highest share 24%. Water resources is 3%, fisheries 6%. Then ecosystem services has a separate tab. So tree cover, if you see here within that, so it's one of the, I think, most comprehensive criteria of measuring the EPI. Coming here, so here EPI has given some answers, and I want to take our viewers through this. That how was the 2020 EPI affected by the COVID-19 pandemic? So this and Australia's wildfire and burning of the Amazon. So these are three big incidents that took place recently, but unfortunately, they have answered that unfortunately these events are too recent to be captured in 2020 EPI. So 2020 EPI is not a reflection of the recent three big incidents or events that took place, but our data partners need time to collect and assemble and verify and dissemble. So they did not cover this. Then I wanted this question. So this is, why did a country rise and drop since last EPI? So what are the main change factors in this? So a country's current score in 2020 EPI should not be compared to scores from the previous versions of the index. With every version of the EPI, we change methodology and use new data sets to reflect the latest advances in science and metrics. And these changes mean that scores calculated under the old methods are not comparable to the new ones. I will come back with our experts with some questions. I want to give some region-wise reflection of. So if you see the country ranking on top is Denmark in the EPI. I think you already have discussed this. Luxembourg, and then United Switzerland. After Switzerland, United Kingdom among the famous countries ranked fourth in this, and France is fifth. Austria is here. So if you see here, now I'll just go region wise so that we can have a little understanding about this. If you go Asia Pacific, Japan scores on the top. South Korea is second. Singapore is doing very well. Taiwan is global ranking 14, but here in the Asia Pacific region, it is the fourth. Brunei has done fairly well. Malaysia, global ranking 68, and in the Asia Pacific ranking 6th. And after that, Thailand, Philippines, Tonga is another country which is ranking in between. Now, so this is about the Asia Pacific. Now, if we go to Southern Asia, I want to give taken South Asia's perspective to it. Bhutan has done extraordinarily well, though in the global ranking it is 107, but it is first in South Asia, within South Asia. After Bhutan is Sri Lanka. Very surprisingly, India is the second last, just before Afghanistan. And before India, we have Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Maldives, uh, Pakistan. Even Pakistan is doing better than Nepal and Bangladesh. So Bangladesh is another country to look up to, the way it is improving in all. Seychelles, globally remarkable progress, and it is ranking globally 38. Gabon is there. Mauritius is 82 global ranking, but here third. South Africa, supposed to be one of the most better countries in the per capita income, but is not doing very well in the global index. So this is what is the perspective. Now the Latin America, if you see Chile, Chile is ranking 44th globally, but first in Latin America and Caribbean region. Colombia, Mexico, Costa Rica, Argentina, and this is what. Now I just want to take the last 10 countries which are ranking at the bottom. Liberia is the last country ranking at 180. Myanmar is not doing at all good. In this, Afghanistan is another country at the bottom. Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, and then Guinea, Madagascar, Solomon Island. And from the bottom, if you see, India is one of such countries which is doing very unfair and very bad in this score in terms of its environmental performance. I think among all the countries, among all the superpowers or prominent economies of the world, I think India is ranking at the bottom, which the Indian policymakers should look at very seriously, because this shows how the country is serious about its environmental issues. And when we talk about that, as we discussed that, but I want to come back with the question that we had for Professor Aga. The question is that the current formula of EPI is not applicable for some parameters in Saudi Arabia. What is your reflection on that?
Thank you, Mr. Akram, for this brief description of the Environmental Performance Index. As you might recall, when you just gave that chart with all the indicators, you could see, for example, the particulate matter as an air quality index. It has an effect of 11%. 11% of the indicator is going for the particulate matter 2.5. As I mentioned just briefly, that now outside there is dust storm. It's a natural phenomenon. We cannot prevent with all the technology in the world. It's a pandemic, you can call it. It can go over borders. So we receive a huge amount of dust, including this PM 2.5. Previously, frankly speaking, PM10 was the indicator, and the PM10 recognized as it is dust. even there is a strong 95% correlation between 2.5 and PM10. There is fraction of that dust still contains the respiratable particle 2.5. So this is we cannot avoid. For that reason, I mentioned and agreed solely with our colleague here raised the question how I can compare, for example, these kind of indicator in the Saudi Arabia and the region. So it has to be normalized. So we can find another ratio that can increase. For example, household solid fuel. How can in Saudi Arabia we have only two sources: electricity and natural gas. Nothing. There is no solid fuels here. So it has 8%. Ozone, it has only 1%. If you go to the others, for example, the ecosystem, as Dr. Zenura mentioned, there is the fisheries, for example, and these things might be taken very small, but it adds to the total of the practice. As you mentioned in your presentation, that you can see that the most developed countries, the high GDPA correlated with good performance, and the highest maybe salaries in the world, Qatar is ranked behind. So this is because I mentioned the other countries, they have all these indexes. When you are going to create an index, maybe Dr. Zenura can explain this more. When you are going to make a local index, you are trying to tackle your in the sustainability context. You are trying to find what are the most significant players in the sustainability. What are your natural resources? What's your, economical, environmental, and the three players of sustainability, you are taken from them. This index made by Yale University, and appreciate that United States from the 70s, they have environmental protection department, and they are leading the world in these kind of regulations, standards, whereas in the region, we don't have any regional solid environmental protection agency that could lead to put kind of regional indicators that might be taken by these highly appreciated, highly esteemed ranking, like the environmental performance index. So I totally agree. There is a challenge in this indexes, and I suggest it needs a deep study and collaboration between researchers to develop normalization of these. And the report, as you mentioned, also mentioned that you cannot compare today's report by the previous one. And they showed in the report that one important thing, which is not only the ranking is important, Mr. Akram, but also the change. If you look to the change, you can find some countries going by minus 10%. You see, so this is another performance that's showing that how is this countries doing. It is not how they perform, how they sustain their position. If you have different variables, which include one variable from the keeper indicator, environmental performance indicator creator, the Yale University, you cannot compare apple with banana in this one. So we have to have a stable one, and I suggest this to be further studied to include normalization for region-wide. And my belief also, a lack of information, as Dr. Zenura mentioned, they might taken this information from maybe from World Bank, I don't know, maybe just trying to connect from the online resources, which is rare in the Middle East and the Africa. And because of that, you find Africa sometimes white, which is because of lack of data, not because of the indicator, in my opinion.
So maybe here to bring the question to Prof. Zainora. Do you believe that these indicators need to be improved and maybe to use the sustainable development indicator rather than using the environmental performance index, which will be more comprehensive and will include more parameters, including the economy and the societal parameters as well?
In the first place, let me answer your second half of the question first. When we talk about environmental performance index, it's in particular only focusing on the environmental side of the sustainability or the SDG. Having said that, they have done mapping. I mean, if you read through the report since I think starting 2018, they have started map out the indicators with the SDGs. So I think it's okay if we were to focus on the environment, but again, just like Prof. Kau was saying, that when we look at the condition or the geographical location of a country, actually plays a lot of important role in determining the ranking of that particular country. So in resonating what Prof has been saying, for example, last time we have, when we were working closely with the Yale team, Yale and Columbia team, we have actually asked them whether they take into consideration, for example, when there were times when water quality index was used as one of the indicators. Have they taken into consideration, for example, dissolved oxygen, the temperature, the roles of temperature in terms of dissolved oxygen? Of course, if you are located on the northern or southern hemisphere, perhaps you have lower temperature, so you have better dissolved oxygen in the river, so you probably get higher marks for that. So, but you cannot penalize the country because they are located in the other region, because your dissolved oxygen is influenced by the climatic factor or by the temperature. So I think that they have made improvement. When we actually interact with them, they have taken that down, noted that down, and make improvements as they went along. As far as when you look at these indicators and reflect back on your country's performance, like I said, if you were to practice that at your nation level, you will have to select which indicators that actually matter to you most and would do good to for you to go forward. And also, like also the indicators, some of them are actually not relevant to your country. If you are a landlocked country, for example, you would not be you wouldn't want paying attention to fisheries, for example, although in EPI they do use materiality filter to actually discard it, or you will not be assigned mark for those indicators that are not relevant to you. Again, in terms of looking at the indicators, when you want to do this practice at your own region, or scaling down at your own country, you would have to involve all the stakeholders in terms of assigning, again, the weightage, because what weightage that has been assigned in the global scale or in the global exercise may not be reflecting is in terms of your priority or your target for your own country. So I would say that these indicators, although those are good for you to use as a guideline when you want to actually analyze them and use to make strategic actions to improve your country further, you're going to have to analyze them in detail.
Back to Prof. Omar, when we reflect the health indicator, which was included as well in the report, do you see that this is more important than like just solely focus on the environmental performance? Because whenever we are talking about environmental pollution, so the most important is the health impacts that will be associated with these kind of pollutants.
Right. Actually, Dr. Wissam, as you mentioned, when you look deeply in these indicators, you can get feeling that they are like life cycle assessments. So they're including ecosystem, they're including health, human health issues, and these things. I totally agree with you, but this is, an initiative which I totally respect. It's, as Dr. Zenura mentioned, it's absolutely good to take action. In my opinion, each country should go deeply in these indicators and try to get these numbers from for each parameter and try to see if this number reflects the real from each official sources. And this is one thing. The other thing is just try to see if this can be improved. Actually, we need action plan. One of the strategic things that should be taken by each country is just to make a strategic plan, including these kind of initiatives or to improve. So as in the Japanese Kaizen, you have always continuous improvement. There is nothing that I just you are collecting data and give it to sources just to rank you and that's it. This is a challenge. Once you enter it, you have to slowly, gradually make improvement, and these need continuous dynamic action plan. So, in my opinion, again, two things. One is just to go deeply into these, and as Dr. Zenura mentioned, try to make a comment on the particular parameters and how they are relevant to your particular country or region. The second is just to take it seriously and just try to make an action plan. Action plans could include legislation, could include kind of investment and improvement. And I believe that ultimately this will reflect on the prosperity of people and in the health of the people everywhere.
Prof. Zainura, how about the scenario in Malaysia, and if we were to link it to the performance of the systems in Malaysia in combating the COVID-19, so reflecting the current scenario with the previous environmental setup, with the future plans. So how do you see the scenario in Malaysia?
Let me rephrase your question. Are you asking, or are you saying that how EPI actually reflecting the COVID, how is it helping COVID-19, or
yes,
how does it change?
and putting on context the health aspects as well.
The health aspect. Okay,
Yep.
as far, just like if you read actually the global EPI 2020, they were not able to capture the effect of COVID-19 in the latest report, because there was, it was too recent as far as EPI data is concerned. They are not using, for example, if the data is produced, if the report was for 2020, it doesn't mean that they use data for 2019 or 2018 even, because the approach is to use most recent years available data. So when we talk about most recent years, it could be even from 2016 or 2015. So looking at the environmental health indicators, whatever our scores in these particular indicators for this year report does not reflect what happened in as far as the impact of COVID-19. And even now at the moment, when we talk about, we are still figuring out whether actually, for example, sanitation or drinking water, for example, will be greatly impacted because of the COVID-19. We are still figuring out whether actually there is a high chance that the virus, for example, could also be spread through drinking water or untreated water, sewage, for example, because there has been concern on that particular matter. But again, like I said, as far as COVID-19 is concerned, we have not found the link yet. But looking at the environmental health indicators, when putting the COVID-19 aside, we have seen that these indicators, for example, air quality, give some indication in terms of how we should be more stringent, or how we should implement. Actually, the regulations, I think in Malaysia, as far as regulation is concerned, we have quite a good set of regulation, but how we actually do the enforcement and how, in fact, how we interact with our neighboring country will determine whether or not we could be better in that particular aspect. To give you an example, not only the condition or the geographical location play an important role in terms of determining our scores, whether it is in ecosystem vitality or in environmental health, even who your neighbors are actually impacted your scores as well. So for example, if you're sharing borders with country who have different regulations or different approach towards the environment, for example, open burning and so on, that would impact you as well, especially if your borders are very close together. Or, for example, if you are sharing rivers, if the water quality from that particular, your neighboring country rivers are not so good because they do not have such good regulations, then that will also impact your score. So, everything, there are so many complex things that need to be addressed when you look at the whether it's scores regarding ecosystem vitality or environmental health. But as far as COVID-19 goes, we have not seen whether, or we don't know yet at this point whether COVID-19 will impact our scores in both objectives.
Mr. Akram?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll share a couple of points. I think it's the discussion is going wonderfully in the right direction. Maybe last 10 minutes we can focus more on the solutions. And to start off, I think the first challenge is our mindset when it comes to environment, because environment is an external factor. And unless we feel the heat of it, we don't act to safeguard our environment. Now, I want to tell our viewers one thing. Water, though 2/3 or 70% of the world is covered with water, but there are very few options out of those 2/3 or 70% of the water which is drinkable. Like, access to drinkable water is very limited. So, can we spend a single day without water? We can't. Are we taking enough protection in terms of not only conserving the water but also using it less for industrial as well as individual consumption, so that keeping the next few generations in mind, that are we saving water today so that our future generations are secure? So that's one, I think we should think. So there are three: water, soil, and the air. So these are three important. Similarly, air. Can we live even half an hour without oxygen? Without air, we can't. But then, are our actions, in the right direction to protect and preserve oxygen or air for us and for our future generation? Similarly, soil, we, like most of we unjustifiably use soil for our greed or greedy purpose or whatever. So first thing what I want to request our viewers is, it's high time we have to develop a mindset that though these are freely available, but they can also end one day, and our future generations might feel the shortcomings or shortage of this abundant natural resources available with us. That's first point. The second point that I want to make and share with our viewers is, now the only solution to the environmental degradation and all this aspect is restricting our consumption, because there is a slight difference between need and our greed. The world has enough resources to meet our needs, but the world doesn't have enough resources to meet the greed of only one individual in the world. What I mean to say, the greed is one thing that cannot be met with your material things. So what we need to think, what is the amount of or quantity of things we are producing, and how much is actually needed for the human civilization or human inhabitant for their consumption and for their survival. So unless we have a balance of that, the world will always have this disbalance of thing, because then we will over exploit our natural resources to meet our greed. So this is then we have to take some policy and non-policy approach. This to save our environment the approach should be bottom up approach. It cannot be top to bottom approach. No government can solve problems if we keep our neighbors dirty. So it has to start with us, with at our individual level. This also does not mean that the governments can sit back and relax. The governments, the policymakers have their own role to play. Most of the developing countries, just like their people did not have made the environmental issue as their priority, their governments have also not made the environmental challenges as their priority. I think government should take EPI more seriously than normally the way emerging or poor countries are taking. So they have a catch-22 situation, whether they lead or make policy for economic growth or industrialization or environmental protection. But then here, there has to be a better approach and learning lessons from the advanced countries. The way they have learned and implemented things, we can learn without reaching to their level and adopt better policies so that our environmental concerns or environmental policies go hand in hand with our industrialization policy. With this, I would be very happy to have your action points on this.
Yeah, I think I just want to conclude in this point. So, Prof. Omar, do you think linking the research agenda of the universities and research centers to those environmental challenges at the national level would help the countries to improve these indicators, these index?
Thank you, Dr. Wissam, for this important question. Actually, yes, country-wise, there is support for the environmental related projects, also for my own university. For example, as a department-wise, in the College of Engineering, we got 4 projects as an institutional fund, 3 of them from the environmental department. So this shows you how much is the university, and also in the country-wise, they are keen to support environmental related projects. However, in research-wise, we are focusing into mainly publication, and publication need the genuine research to produce something novel. However, in this kind of environmental indicators, policy is the main player. On the other hand, we need to support our policymakers to do some kind of actions. For example, at the end of a project related to wastewater management in the eastern province of the Saudi Arabia, and this project explored the current situation of using conventional biological treatment with other advanced treatments and their effect on the ecosystem. So we might need, at the conclusion of this study, we might need to have more advanced treatment, because we could find some pharmaceutical which cannot be degraded by the conventional biological treatment that goes with the effluent ultimately to the receiving water, which is the sea, and you know that it can come back to the consumer bank. Also, for issues like microplastics. Microplastics are everywhere, and they are in the food cycle in every country. So we need to take action about using these plastics and reuse, encourage reuse, and using more environmentally friendly products. So all of these comes in some terms of awareness in terms of research. Currently, we are doing 2 different studies related to the effect of COVID-19 on the biomedical sector or biomedical waste. So we'd like to know how much is being produced in this pandemic and how this can be dealt. Also, we are aiming on the public perception on these kind of biomedical waste, the gloves and the masks that is being stranded everywhere, and it goes with the trash, and could have contamination. So all of these kind of awareness, kind of legislation and research as a holistic should be submitted to the each country should submit or follow as a strategic plan to develop their own performance indicators. So yes, I believe there should be not only local research but collaborative work. And Saudi Arabia also support the collaborative work between different countries to find solution for different issues, including the environmental one, and to gain some experience from other countries, regional countries, and internationally also in terms of environmental performance. So I believe we need to do more research and locally, and just putting these guidelines, these performance indicators could be the guidelines for us to tackle which one could be for research, the other just good for awareness, and the other for governments to make the needed legislation.
So maybe a quick response from Prof. Zainura about is it those index linked to the research agendas in the research efforts in the Malaysian universities?
Right. I would like to address one thing first. If a country decide to take this exercise into actions, or if they would like to go into deeper, and for example, if Malaysia has taken action before, but if other country would to decide to go on and invite researchers joining the project, the thing is that you should not be expecting that you would see drastic changes over the period of 2 years or over the period of 4 years, because again, they are using different method, different approach, different set of data as the time goes by. But the target should be you want to improve the condition in your own country, regardless whatever the ranking will be. But I believe that in the future, as the time goes by, when you do this effort, then it will be, eventually reflected in the ranking as well. But having said that, as far as research is concerned, I agree with Prof. Omar, is that our direction probably slightly different in terms of making impacts to this index. Although right now we are shifting from fundamental research to translational research, but with research alone, we cannot do much, because we could share our expertise, our opinions, and our findings with the policymakers, but unless they are willing to adopt and adapt and accept that as an evidence base for policy enhancement, only then you could help the government to improve the condition of the country. And also, as for example, giving the in this situation, I believe also that research or university could play an important role, because you are the neutral body who could make a neutral assessment based on data that you have on hand. If you were to appoint organization or ministry, for example, there is possibility, or there would be biasness, or even if there's no biasness, but there would be perception from other organization in terms of the data would be politically influenced, for example. So in answering your question, yes, I think research play or university play an important role in helping refining or improving the situation of the country, but research and finding of the research and universities to work hand in hand with the government to make impactful changes in the future.
Thank you so much. So back to Mr. Akram.
Thank you so much. I would here, with your permission, like to conclude the discussion, like highlighting some of the core facts. It remains that EPI is certainly one of such indicators which gives a reflection that which country is performing how, but it is certainly not the end of it. As Dr. Noura said, that a lot of things, there are a lot of indicators which are not applicable to other regions. Like for landlocked countries, the criteria should be different than some countries which have bigger sea base. So So maybe, so we have to keep all these things in mind, but this certainly gives a direction how countries are working or taking the issue of environmental protection seriously. I think two more suggestions that came to my mind is one, innovation. uh, the fit science and technology should always dictate the country's growth plan, the economic and industrial plan. I think we always have to give higher advantage and weightage to science and technology. I think innovation can be a very nice way of arresting the climate change or environmental issues. The other important aspect that I'd be very happy to see in future, and we would be very happy to collaborate with and work with UTHM, which we are already doing, and then with Professor Aga and many other. So, Professor Zainura, would be very happy to work with you. Is the industry academic collaboration in research. So, without industry's involvement, no academia research is going to bring any result which is really practical on the ground, making any difference with society. Similarly, industry, without having any support from academia, may not have the right approach of solving the ground problem. They might make a big business, but it might not solve the problem. So, with this, I would like to end the discussion. Viewers, thank you so much. Keep watching the Policy Times. If you have not subscribed to our channel yet, do visit our Facebook and YouTube channel and subscribe us. We will be back, and every day, every Thursday at 2 to 3 Indian time, we'll be with another panel of experts discussing different important issues of climate change and environmental issues. Keep watching the Policy Times. Thank you so much, experts, for joining us for this wonderful discussion.
Thank you so much.